The Supercommittee on Capitol Hill only has 9 days to come to a consensus on budget with significant cuts. Can they make that deadline? And if they don't, what will that mean for the nation? Kayla Fenner joins us in the studio with the story. What do you think, Kayla? Are they going to have a deal for us?
Well, there's been a lot of debate over the deficit reduction plan, so I talked to some AU faculty members to see what they thought about the topic. Congress's deficit panel, otherwise known as the Supercommittee, has only 9 more days to create a budget plan and meet their November 23rd deadline. But the 12-person committee is struggling to come to an agreement. The Democratic proposal focuses on splitting the amount of spending cuts and new revenue, while Republicans want to create new revenue but limit deductions and reduce income tax rates. But even if the committee does decide to compromise, the plan will still need to be approved by Congress. Government professor Danny Hayes says that this may be more difficult than an actual agreement.
The supercommittee, even if the members of the committee agree to something, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to pass Congress. And so I think what's more likely to happen is that the trigger for the cuts that were put in place months ago when this deal was created are more likely to be the outcome that we get.
If the Supercommittee cannot come to an agreement by their deadline, there will be an automatic budget cut of $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. Republicans are pushing for more spending cuts on programs, but the Democrats won't budge unless the Republicans agree to accept an increase in tax revenue. David Cotter from KOGOD's Department of Accounting and Taxation says that a larger deficit reduction may not be likely given the limited time frame.
Folks who have advocated to the Supercommittee that they shouldn't think small, they shouldn't think about 1.2 trillion, they should think about 4 trillion or 5 trillion. Well, once you start to get into those sorts of numbers, you really have to get into serious tax changes. My guess is they don't have time to do that.
The two parties seem to be promoting completely different agendas, and it doesn't seem like the committee will be agreeing on anything anytime soon. Unfortunately, time is just not in their favor. Joining us live to talk more about the budget is Dante Chinny. He's one of the fellows at the Center for Congressional and Presidential Studies. So why do you think the Supercommittee is having such a difficult time compromising?
Well, yeah, it's only 1.2 trillion, right? Well, the problem is we're talking about a lot of big money, and we're talking about what really boils down to a philosophical debate between Democrats and Republicans about the scope of government and the amount of taxation. These are questions that are extremely hard to handle, extremely hard to sort through, and that's why they're struggling. And they're going to go right up to the deadline if they get anything at all.
So do you think there will be a deadline, or do you think there will be a compromise?
There's reason to believe that there's been some movement over the last week. The question is, in my mind, is it going to happen fast enough? The Republicans have moved a little bit to the Democrats. Democrats, if you have said, if you come far enough, we'll meet you. But 9 days isn't a lot of time. So they're going to have to do it quickly. I think, I feel a lot better if this movement had started a week ago. But we'll see. It's going to be very close. It's going to be right to the wire.
So what are their options as of now? Obviously, they can't do too much with increased tax revenues because that's going to take a lot of time. What are their options as far as an agreement?
Well, I mean, if they can't do the agreement, obviously the trigger just kicks in, and then there's plenty of cuts for everybody. But nobody wants that because those are cuts without any kind of really congressional say as to where they come from. That's why they put that trigger in there. I think the best hope is, one of the things they're hoping now is they have an agreement to do a certain amount of tax increases and that require some kind of tax code restructuring. I'm not sure, and this remains to be seen, whether or not the Supercommittee thing is structured in such a way that will allow them to punt that decision down the road a little bit. But that's definitely a possibility anyway.
Okay. And do you think that if this does end up becoming an actual plan from the Supercommittee, will it get passed by Congress?
Right, that's the real question. You can be, the super committee or the super duper committee. Ultimately, you have to get through the houses of Congress to ratify this thing. And I think the Senate, particularly some Democrats, are willing to give a lot. But I think you get to the House, you have Democrats and Republicans kind of both have their backs up. It's going to be very difficult to get whatever this plan looks like through there, especially if you've got a lot of Tea Party members in the Republican House. They're not going to want any kind of tax increase. They've made that very clear. It's not going to be easy.
who do you think is going to have to, or I guess which side do you think is going to have to really give more in this kind of topic?
I mean, well, hopefully neither of them feels they have to give too much. But when you think about it, really, you're ultimately asking the Republicans to give a little more. Just because in the end they don't, because of the line they drew. The line they drew in the past was we don't want to raise taxes at all, and that's not really possible. You can't just cut $100 trillion from the budget when the economy is as fragile as it is right now. To just take that out of the economy, it will push us either, if not back into recession, into a deeper form of kind of just economic morass that we're in right now.
So do you think at this point it's almost better that we fall back on that 1.2 trillion deficit?
No, it's not, because it's like that was there as the, if all else fails. Hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully these sides can come to an agreement and really come up with something that's real and can get some backing.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Kayla. That was some pretty interesting stuff over there. Good to hear. Well, coming up, we have big economic developments in Europe and Japan, but what will that mean for the United States? Our financial reporter, Nick Pisano, is standing by with a live report. Stay tuned.